Moving from theory to practice, we find the standard for Thelemites concisely expressed in the chapter on discipline from the Book of Wisdom or Folly, where Crowley commands, "Neglect not the daily miracle of the Mass, either by the rite of the Gnostic Catholic Church or that of the Phoenix." The second sort of Mass mentioned here was the first that Crowley composed for use by Thelemites. It originally appeared in the Book of Lies as chapter 44. The Mass of the Phoenix is a solo ritual to take place at sunset, a version of what Crowley would later call the Eucharist of 5 elements. In chapter 62, he explains these elements as representatives of the 5 senses, and he describes how the ceremony aims to make the magician free, unconditioned, the absolute. The Mass of the Phoenix became the centerpiece of Crowley's first Thelemic Eucharist for groups, a ceremony known only as the ritual ordained for public service. In this ritual, the priest performed the Mass of the Phoenix, assisted by an acolyte and a violin-playing priestess. The priest was also bound to a cross, from which he preached to the attendees. This ritual was soon performed at least a couple of times, but thereafter rendered obsolete by the Gnostic Mass, which Crowley authored and the O.H.O. Theodore Royce authorized for the use of O.T.O., the central ceremony of its public and private celebration. And it is this later Eucharist of 2 elements, elements of meat and drink, that has become the paragon of the miracle of the Mass for Thelemites. I want to suggest that the Gnostic Mass has 3 very different purposes which it simultaneously fulfills, so that its miracle is likewise threefold, balancing a triad. The purposes have individual, local, and universal domains, and I characterize them as magical, communal, and doctrinal, and each is in some sense secret. The magical effect for the individual is the one that Crowley explains in Magic in Theory and Practice. The communicant is gradually made divine, being brought swallow by swallow toward knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, and to the ultimate attainment. And this effect is secret, in the sense that it is utterly ineffable. The communal effect for a local group has to do with the shared knowledge and the recognition among us that we each aspire to the ineffable with a shared means, supporting each other in the way of our going to the East for nourishment and ecstasy of the spirit. As Northrop Frye points out in his study of William Blake, the bread and wine signify the key social tasks of harvest and vintage, where the winepress and the mill may represent not only the disintegration of form, but the reuniting of nature, and the reuniting of divided individuals in community. And this effect is secret, in the sense that only those who participate can perceive the great communion feast in which human life is reintegrated into its real form. The doctrinal effect that applies universally involves the role of the Gnostic Mass, like the O.T.O. initiations, in adumbrating the supreme secret of the sovereign sanctuary. That secret is traditionally held to concern sexual magic. To quote Norman Brown once more, although he was not an O.T.O. initiate, "Eating is the form of the fall. The woman gave me, and I did eat. Eating is the form of sex. Copulation is oral copulation. When the Aranda ask each other, 'Have you eaten?' they mean, 'Have you had intercourse?' Eating is the form of war. Human blood is the life and delightful food of the warrior. Eating is the form of redemption. Except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. We must eat again of the tree of knowledge in order to fall into innocence." And all of these secret transmutations, each of these mysterious alchemies, happens in us. The candlelight and incense, the invocations and music, the officers and congregation, the cakes and wine, are all within the indivisible life experience of the communicant at the Mass. And so too, their effects, threefold or more, transpire in each of us as we participate. Transmutation is inevitable. Our cells constantly exchange the matter that they organize. They themselves die and are replaced. Generation succeeds generation in the life of humanity. The Eucharist addresses the character of that transmutation, that the innermost secret substance might be refined, dross becoming pure, lead becoming gold. May we each labor for that nourishment and rest in that ecstasy daily. In nomine Cause